Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities and Alternative College and High School here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast is to dive into the April 20 and 26 edition of Christian History and Ideas. As always, our article is filched from the Postal magazine, this online publication, which covers such a diverse array of topics. Before we take a look at what's on offer this month, an invitation to join the staff and students of the Institute online for the Divine Office. And if you go to our Liturgy and Devotions page, which is right below the Postal link for this month, you will find the times, Eastern Standard, that you may join us, and also the stable link. Just click that anytime you're able to and get praying with us. Remember from the Gospels that the more followers of Christ who are praying together, the more powerful is the prayer. I have scandalized people in the past by making the analogy, a very appropriate analogy, in fact, to the Bitcoin thing. The Bitcoin program, algorithm, CD-ROM. I don't know what the hell Bitcoin is, but I do know that you need a lot of computer towers to process the Bitcoin. And the more computer towers you have, the more Bitcoin you get. Well, guess what? For once, a materialistic analogy is appropriate. In fact, a lot of times materialistic analogies are appropriate to the spiritual world. And this is one of them. So the more computer towers you have, the more Bitcoin in your digital wallet. And the more people praying together, the more grace and the more powerful is the prayer. And that's the principle behind all liturgy, including the Divine Office. You, of course, do not need to be enrolled in the college to join us. This is completely open to the public. Also, you can see I have some updating to do, which by the time you see this will have been accomplished. The Holy Week schedules here in New Milford. We assisted one of the local churches with our packets and our persons to sing Tenebrae, which would not happen because And without the work of Apocatastasis, our donors, our staff who have contributed to the packet, et cetera. But I also bring your attention in any instance to our resources. Underneath the Divine Office Times, you can see various helpful resources of a liturgical nature primarily, but also of a devotional and, how would you say, social dimension in terms of Catholic social teaching and so forth. Here we have the recent edition of The Fourth Cup by Dr. Scott Hahn of Steubenville University. And I didn't realize how recent a book that was, 2017, 2018, I think. Also appropriate to this holy time of Easter are the Stations of the Resurrection, which you can freely download. And a lot of people know about the much older Stations of the Cross, but since the time of St. John Paul II, there are, in fact, Stations of the Resurrection. So you can download both of those station packets also on our site, and many other things besides. The creme de la creme on this page is Pius Parsha's liturgical year. Good luck finding that online, especially since one of these darling publishers has swooped in and republished it and seemingly recaptured the copyright. But old John Coleman knows how to get things done. So you can just download the old Church's Year of Grace and save a few Bitcoin in your digital wallet. All right. So here is our image from the Apostle this month. And our article altogether is entitled An Early Medieval Easter Hymn. And it's by Grier J. Prescott, whom I believe we have looked at in the past couple of months in some other capacities. That name rings a bell. And this painting, type of mural on a wall, we see is the Pancreator, a very popular first millennium image of Christ, the creator of all, literally, the Logos. The Pancreator, St. Isidore's Basilica, and in this instance, in the second millennium, from about 1180. And not looking too shabby for all of its 900 odd years. Christ the Pancreator. All right. And not just popular long ago, but if you go to the Basilica in Washington, D.C., I believe it's entitled the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, which makes sense because she's the patroness of the Americas. Well, actually, no, Our Lady of Guadalupe, patroness of the Americas. The Immaculate Conception is the patroness of America, the United States. So anyway, there's your basilica name. And if you go there, you'll see a kind of 1950s version of this. A huge, rather muscular, somewhat looking like Apollo, which is also a very, very much older Christian type of iconography to show Christ as a jacked young man like the Greeks knew Apollo, kind of making that cultural appropriation, but that has negative connotations, and that certainly wasn't how that was used. But anyway, it's a recurring motif, the Pancreator. All right. Now, before we hop into Mr. Prescott's article this month, a look at the larger apostle world. I've said this probably every recording for the past 6 months or a year, and I stick to my guns that if you apply yourself to this website and read an article every day or every other or third day, however you portion it out for the month, and you stick with that, you will have a ongoing college level education, an autodidact education by reading and then following up appropriately with the different articles and authors and artwork. So just a suggestion. And if you're like me, when it comes to such articles, and this has nothing to do with the Apostle or with the Apocatastasis, we're not being sponsored, but I do swear by this logo. You see my cursor? This little megahorn thing? Megaphone? This is the Read Aloud app. You might have one of these sorts of features on your computer, but I swear by this sort of thing, the Read Aloud app, and you get through articles depending on your personality and how you digest things. This may be helpful. It may not be helpful in the same vein. Okay, so let's hop into here. We know our artwork. We know where this is coming from the postal. All that remains for our poor old eyes is to blow up the text. All right, I'm going to read a bit here, and we're going to get into the Victimae Pascale Laudes, which was, of course, the so-called bumper music of this broadcast. That's what you heard before I started jabbering on. The sequence Victimae Pascale Laudes stands as a monumental artifact of Western Christian liturgy, a poetic and musical triumph that has resonated through nearly a millennium of religious and cultural change. As one of only a handful of medieval sequences to survive the liturgical reforms of the Council of Trent, it occupies a unique position, a bridge between the early medieval explosion of liturgical creativity and the standardization of rites of the modern Catholic Church. And when the author says modern, he means since the 16th century. He does not mean in the past 10 years or since Vatican II. He means in the past, I guess 500 years now. That's the modern church. And not only, is that designation in the case of ecclesiastical history, but also of profane history as well. You go to college, the modern European history begins in about 1500. Anyhow, while the Victimae Pascale Laudes also serves as a wellspring for Reformation chorales and contemporary polyphonic masterpieces, its history is not merely a chronicle of a single hymn, but a microcosm of the broader evolution of Western liturgy, music, and theology. From its origins in the 11th century as a dramatic, poetic dialogue on the resurrection, through its contentious editing in the 16th century, to its continued life in modern worship and concert halls, the Victimae Pascale Laudes encapsulates the enduring power of liturgical art to adapt, survive, and inspire. All right. So here we have the text of our prayer, and in the introduction just read, and indeed in this introduction from a most helpful website that's been around forever and a day, apreceslatine.org, when I was a little whippersnapper, when I was just dabbling in traditionalism, which I've long since sworn off, Catholic traditionalism, but when I thought that was traditional, and when I thought that was Catholic, I came across this site, and those, somewhat critical remarks of mine, of course, do not shade this particular website whatsoever at all. But in an earlier and more personally naive epoch, simply having Latin was enough to designate you a so-called traditional Catholic. And I well remember this from my early days. In fact, my initial toe in the water in Latin came from this website. And as I swear by the sun, the moon, and the stars, the primitive websites, of which this is hardly the most primitive, but it's on that end of things, often will have the best information. Those old websites from the 90s and early 2000s, or the ones that haven't updated to the razzle-dazzled, often will be a gold mine of material. And also, interesting observation, their links will often work a lot longer than the newer sorts of websites. So anyhow, in either instance, whether it's the postal article that we're focusing on this month or this breakout into the lyrics, the sequence, there's a repeated reference to this type of what is a sequence? A sequence, this liturgical thing or liturgical feature, a sequence is a hymn which serves in a sense as a meditation on the coming gospel. and on the liturgical feast of the day. As the apostle article, and no doubt this little snippet that I'll read will point out, in fact, I can see it right now, as can you, there were once many, many more sequences in the Latin Rite. And Trent was a very conservative council, maybe necessarily conservative given the liturgical chaos in the Reformation times, maybe necessarily conservative. Trent cut that back quite a bit. After Trent, my understanding is that the sequences, again, these extended meditations on the gospel of the day, especially, and the larger feast, preceding the gospel liturgically, so after the gradual, we would call now the responsorial psalm, after that, but before the deacon would sing the gospel, you would have on these feast days the sequence inserted, these poetical meditations. My understanding is that after Trent, initially, the Victimae Paschale Laudes, the Dies Irae, these are not in order, forgive me, the or Salutaris, Ostia, the one for communion, for Corpus Christi, and the Veni Creator, of course. I forget the one specifically for Corpus Christi. I'm going to find it out. It's not the O Salutaris, actually. Aquinas wrote that for the feast, but there's a sequence that's quite a bit older than St. Thomas Aquinas. Lauda Sion. Okay, so starting from Easter, the Victimae Paschale Laudes, or as they call it here, the Victimae Paschale, existed after Trent. Then you would have the Veni Creator at Pentecost. Then at Corpus Christi, here we go, the Lauda Sion, and then for All Souls Day, you would have the Dies Irae. And then in the 17th century, the Stabat Mater, at her cross, her station keeping, stood the mournful mother weeping, etc. What we know maybe from Station at the Cross, the Stabat Mater in the 17th century, a century after Trent, was reintroduced into the Western liturgy. The Victimae Paschale Laudes, the focus of the Apostle article, is indeed a sequence for Easter Sunday. At one time, there were many sequences in use, but the Council of Trent abolished all but a few. Today, only 4 are used. Again, the Victimae Paschale Laudes, I should have just read this, I suppose. The Veni Sancte Spiritus, the Lauda Sion, and the Stabat Mater, of which the first 2 are obligatory and the latter 2 are optional. Victimae Paschale is usually attributed to Wippo of Burgundy, a hell of a name there, the chaplain of the German Emperor Conrad II in the 11th century. It has also been attributed to Notker Balbudus, the 10th century, and Adam of St. Victor. All right. And what we're looking at here is actually a conversation between Jesus Christ and the Saint Mary Magdalene. And we read about this, as I shall, from the Holy Gospel according to John, chapter 20, verse 11. But Mary stayed outside the tomb weeping. This is Easter Sunday. And as she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet where the body of Jesus had been. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus there, but did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" She thought it was a gardener and said to him, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned around and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop holding on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them I am going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary of Magdala went and announced it to the disciples. I have seen the Lord, and what he had told her. Evangelium Domini tibi Christi rex aeternae gloriae. Okay, so this is John chapter 20, starting at verse 11. Here is the artistic meditation. Christians to the Paschal victim offer sacrifice and praise. The sheep are ransomed by the Lamb, and Christ, the undefiled, hath sinners to his Father reconciled. Death with life contended, combat strangely ended, life's own champion slain, yet lives true reign. Tell us, Mary, say what thou didst see upon the way. The tomb the living did enclose, I saw Christ's glory as he rose. By the way, this is breaking the fourth wall. Those of you who know modern media analysis, this is breaking the fourth wall in the 11th century. The angels there attesting, shroud with grave clothes resting, Christ my hope hath risen, he goes before you into Galilee. That Christ is truly risen from the dead we know, victorious King, thy mercy shown, amen, alleluia. All right, so there we have the English words of the Victimae Paschale Laudes. Carrying on with our postal article from Grier J. Prescott. Here we go, the origins and authorship in the medieval context. Now, I think we're pretty solid that this is a medieval hymn, but the context is what Grier brings to our attention. The precise origin of the Victimae Paschale Laudes are shrouded in the typical ambiguities of medieval authorship. The sequence is most commonly attributed to Whippo, a chaplain to the Holy Roman Emperor. This attribution, while not definitively proven, is the most widely accepted by musicologists and liturgical historians. Whippo, who was a poet and chronicler in the imperial court, would have been well positioned to compose such a work, which quickly gained popularity in the German lands and beyond. Not only did the Germans likely come up with this sequence, but they also are responsible, if memory serves, for the inclusion of the creed at Mass. It was one of the Holy Roman Emperors of the German Empire who instituted that, and that got popularized, the creed on Sundays and feast days, certain feast days. However, we continue. The sequence's importance and widespread dissemination led to it being attributed to other significant figures over time, including Notker Balbuus, who is the coolest name of this broadcast, so-called father of the sequences, the French King Robert II the Pious, maybe the Parisian poet Adam of St. Victor. These conflicting attributions, rather than undermining the work's significance, underscore its central place in the medieval liturgical imagination. It was a text so esteemed that it demanded a prestigious author. Keep in mind that a lot of these pieces, and also just general, spiritual writings, sermons, and so forth that are written down at this time, they're being written by religious. And what is the primary focus of the religious? It's humility. So it's not uncommon, even through the 20th century, I'm sure now even our lights in the monasteries and nunneries are no doubt publishing under the same convention, and that convention is to publish like a like a good folk musician as anonymous, or some nom de plume that does not stand you out in the crowd as a religious. So guess what? That was the case 1,000 years ago. To understand the significance of Whippo's composition, one must appreciate the genre of the sequence itself. Now, here's the medieval context that we alluded to. We know it's medieval, but what is the medieval context that Mr. Prescott here is bringing to our attention? Emerging from the practice of troping, the addition of new text to pre-existing mislematic chant, the sequence or sequentia developed in the 9th century as a form of liturgical expansion. Now, I don't know what on earth mislematic chant means, and neither do you. So let's go to Bishop Google and see what we're looking at here. So meslima is a singing technique where a single syllable of the text is sung across multiple flowing musical notes. Okay, we see that it exists in R&B and pop, and the American singers Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey have famously used it. Well, apparently the monks beat the women to it. Meslematic chant. Tropes, by the way, tropes are another liturgical buzzword or feature, shall we say. The trope that most of you, Catholic or Protestant, Latin Catholic at least, are going to be most familiar with, and I do believe the more liturgical Protestants, and probably just my natural inclination, will be aware of the responsorial psalm. This is a feature of the Catholic Mass by name. We call it the responsorial psalm. I don't know what the Book of Common Prayer or some other traditions call it, but you'll be familiar with the idea of someone reading the Bible in church, and then there will be a song, a worship song, or a psalm from King David in the Catholic Latin Rite. That's typically what you have after the first reading, a responsorial psalm. This is a larger feature, though. This is under the umbrella of the trope. If you sing the divine office, you will know the trope, because there's always a trope after a Bible reading, whether that's the short lesson at Lauds and Vespers or the longer lessons at the Office of Readings, and even the expansion pack, the appendices for Sundays and feast days that some of you do if you're really in it to win it. That will be the Te Deum. All of those are tropes. The trope is this typically scriptural application, selection to a reading. Logically and chronologically and historically, the reading does not follow necessarily from the trope. It almost never historically, chronologically, or logically follows. But poetically, it is chosen. It is on the poetic grounds and the spiritual grounds that one text of the Bible is being applied, usually a psalm, or some poetry is being applied to a Bible reading. That's a trope. And coming off of Holy Lent, personally speaking, I always read Oscar Wilde's essay, his poem, The Ballad of Reading Gaol, and his essay accompanying it, De Profundis. De Profundis points this out, that the trope, the responsorial psalm, the worship song following the Bible reading, this is actually a legacy and echo of the Greek pagan theater. There's actually a legacy of the Greco influence on Christianity. And it's a beautiful addition, and it's a thrilling addition to realize that at Holy Mass, when we're doing the tropia or at the divine office, even if we're alone, we're actually plugging into a custom which goes back to the classical world. So old is it. This is called troping. And as we read earlier in this particular postal article, it is something, especially in the medieval period, that became quite prolific, maybe too prolific, according to the Council of Trent. Early sequences, like those of Notker, were characterized by prose text set to music and painted phrases where the melody was repeated for successive pairs of texts in line. By the 11th and 12th centuries, the sequences had evolved into more structured and poetic form. The Vicme Pascale Laudes exemplifies this mature phrase. Its structure is that of the paired versicle from form, an opening versicle A followed by a series of paired strophes, where each pair is sung to the same musical phrase. This formal clarity, combined with use of rhyme and rhythmic verse, made it more accessible and memorable than its earlier, more free-form predecessors. The musicologist Richard Taruskin notes that in this and similar late Frankish sequences, the melody, quote, delineates the principal parts of the mode with great regularity. So this is like the antiphon between the strophes. If you are familiar with the responsorial psalm or the liturgy of the hours, this is like the antiphon between the strophes. Look here, from Praetus Latine. Right. So Dic nobis Maria quid vidisti in via, sepulchrum Christi venitis e gloriam vidae resurgentis, angelicos teste sudarium advestes, surrec Christus pes mea praecede suus in gradem. What did you see? Right? 2 lines, 4 lines, 2 lines, 4 lines, right? In the more formal, more scriptural tropes, they'll tend to be the same line itself again and again. And this fellow Taruscan says, this delineates again the principal parts of the mode of the great regularity, creating the work of remarkable structural cohesion. All right, the text, the drama, and the dialogue. The text of this sequence is a dramatic masterpiece that distinguishes it from many other sequences. Why did Trent keep it, right? I mean, there must have been worthy hundreds of sequences existed before Trent. Most of them were cut, and I dare say most of them were worthy of at least being passable poetry. This had to be especially good. Rather than being a purely theological exposition or a meditative poem, it is structured as a dramatic dialogue. The sequence opens with a call to the faithful Christians to the Paschal victim offer sacrifice and praise. After a brief theological statement on Christ as the sacrificial lamb, and by the way, brand new for me, is the contents of the 4th cup, which I alluded to before. You can freely download this from our website. And I think I've heard passing references to this, but apparently the Hebrews, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, would skewer the lamb in the manner not just in one direction, but in 2 directions, so that it would form a cross. And that really blew my mind from reading this text during Holy Week, the 4th cup, that the Paschal lamb literally would be skewered in a cruciform shape. So you would have one, from the head to the tail of the animal, one skewer, and then one from the flanks, making a cross. So a remarkable little piece there. And you can freely download this from our website by Scott Hahn. Or if you have a few bucks and a few Bitcoin, you can also buy the book. But in any case, we have Christ as the sacrificial lamb who reconciles sinners. The narrative shifts then to a direct address to Mary Magdalene, breaking, as I said, the 4th wall. The anonymous narrator asks, who's in it? It's us, it's the church, it's the bride of Christ, right? Tell us, Mary, what did you see on the way? I saw the tomb of the living Christ and the glory of his rising. And this forms the core of the sequence's eyewitness testimony. Remember, when it came time in Acts of the Apostles to replace poor Judas, that you had to be a witness of the Lord's resurrection. That is what constituted you as an apostle, or even the candidate of an apostle, is you had to witness the resurrection. And that is why Mary Magdalene is considered an apostle to the apostles, because she did experience the resurrection of Christ. And also, for that matter, we can see this is the elevation of the Feast of St. Mary Magdalene. Maybe this is a world right now, in this epoch of church history, this is a world that needs the resurrection message more than ever. And so that we see liturgically, she has been upranked along, for that matter, with Martha and Lazarus on the concomitant feast on the octave day of St. Mary Magdalene, is the feast of the 3 of them all together, the family. Of course, Lazarus, hold on. Lazarus, the sibling of Martha and Mary, certainly is the fellow who's raised in the gospel, but my mind was wandering there. If he's the Lazarus being referred to in the parable, Allahu Adam, we won't get into that question altogether. But in any instance, we have the mention of Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles. All right. And also the fact that the replacements of the apostles at the time of Revelation had to have themselves to be even considered, like Matthias and I think a guy called Eustace, I think. You're right, they had to have seen Christ. Okay. The dialogic form, we continue reading from the Postal article, was not merely a literary device. It had profound liturgical and paraliturgical implications. That's the medieval world, right? This is the para-liturgical. We see that with the slightly later Station of the Cross, very popular. We see the popularity, even now, in paraliturgical devotions. The Station of the Cross would be the best example. Where you also see that, I suggest, although it's technically not paraliturgical, would be the dialogues on Palm Sunday and on Good Friday. When we read the gospel, the priest and a lector and another reader in the congregation, they're going back and forth as if they were characters in the selections. Right, this paraliturgical, and that's an echo, just as the sequences are of the medieval liturgy, so are these sort of drama plays on Palm Sunday and Good Friday. The question and answer structure made it ideally suited for performances as part of the Easter liturgical dramas that flourished in the Middle Ages. As noted by the Episcopal Church's glossary, the sequence was, quote, at times performed as part of a traditional extra-liturgical Easter drama, unquote. The dialogue between Ecclesia, the church, represented by the narrator and Mary Magdalene Maria, could be enacted by two singers or semi-dramatic groups, bringing the gospel narratives to life in a visceral, literally guts, right? Viscera in Latin are guts, in a visceral, gut-formed way for the congregation that did not have ready access to the biblical text. This dramatization is a crucial part of the sequence's history, linking it to the broader tradition of liturgical theater, from whence much of liturgical Western drama eventually descended. All right, so there's a lot here in Grier J. Prescott's article, an early medieval Easter hymn, the Victimae Paschale Laudes, from the Postal. This article is down below, as is the access to the fourth cup and a lot more, including our daily prayer times and link from Apocatastasis' Liturgy and Devotions page. So that's down below. And in the meantime, check out all the articles from the Postal. And it's not just religious articles, incidentally, a great deal of politics and culture finds its way on the site, and I'd have it no other way myself. And with that, I'm going to conclude, speaking of the paraliturgical and the bleeding over of pop culture, we would say now, or folk culture into religious themes and vice versa. I'm going to knock off with a folk piece called The Resurrection Romp on this Easter tide. So thank you so much for hanging out here this April of 2026. Get reading and enjoy all the music of this beautiful season of new life.
One evening in April, Christ called in the lads to take origin heed of a new scheme he had. And old fella told me when I phoned home that from Good Friday on yous are out on your own, conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Now, Peter, my dear friend, please pay close heed, for what's going down's a bit hard to conceive. And in a nutshell, quite shortly, I won't be with ye, for that has decided to sacrifice me, conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Well, Jesus Christ, Jesus, you're soft in the head. You're a grand, healthy young lad, like you won't be dead. For at least 30 years, you've a fine life ahead. Cheer up and we'll go for a drinking Magdead's, conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Look, Pete, take it easy, for all this is real. In fact, if it doesn't happen, my mission will fail. On Friday at 3, I die after a parade, but on Sunday, the day is, I rise from the dead, conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Well, Jay, you're the devil, but you know I care, and you know that I'd follow you anywhere. But resurrection, you're cod, now you're pushing it there. Oh, the things you come out with, by Christ, you're a rare one. Conk doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Look, Peter, quit messing, for all this is true, and for the PR, I'm depending on you. Come Sunday at dawn, I'll emerge from the tomb. I want to see CNN, Charlie Board and Sky News. Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Well, next thing he was lifted and couldn't get bail, and under the PTL locked up in jail, on the word of some Pharisee in the Times or the Mail, on sentenced to hang from a cross by 3 nails. Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Duly 2 mornings later, before the sun rose, he was up and about practising media posing and drafting press statements in BBC prose to explain why an Easter uprising was chosen. Conk-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. At 6 on the button he rolled back the stone, but to his dismay not a sinner had shown. Not a soul was in sight and no witness was there, but by sounds from the town they were out on the tear. Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. In the bell box he tripped over Simon and Bat, who said try the 4 seasons for Thaddeus and Matt. John, Andy and Phil read and Mother Red Caps. In the brazen head Judas was knocking back schnapps. Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. Supergrass at the meeting place led him to Cus's, where Thomas was doubting the wisdom of boozing the James's malt Guinness in O'Donoghue's, while the Goleen had Peter up singing Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day. There you are, Jesus, well, you know what it is. You'll be reds and you died when you hear what you've missed. Judas came home on Wednesday night with a fist full of silver, and since then we've been on the piss. Conk-a-doodle-I, doodle-I, doodle-I day.